know, I was gonna start this talk with a little bit of biography, but it looks like everybody here knows me.
Who are you?
Yeah, right. So no biography. But I do need to say that before I open the show, I experience a lot of anxiety, and I have bizarre dreams. And before the last artist talk that I gave some time ago, I dreamt that I came into the room where I was supposed to be speaking, and there were all these chairs, but nobody was in them. You know? Nobody showed up. So before this one, and this was a dream after the show was hung, but before it opened, I had a dream where I was running down a long, broad corridor, dragging somebody behind me that I wanted to take to see my show that I was so proud of. And I got to these big double doors, and I opened them up, and I looked in, and the walls were bare. The paintings were not there. So there were these two very authoritative-looking people standing over a table, and there were my paintings lying flat out, and they were looking very concerned, and I ran over, and they said, well, they tore off the wall. They were pinned to the wall, and they tore, and they're just, we can't hang them, they're a mess. And I said, oh, no, I can fix them. And I picked one up, and I took it to a table, and I grabbed a roll of tape, and I looked at them, and I said, there's no fixing. They were such a mess. So at that point, I had to wake up, because I couldn't do it. And this is something that I was very anxious about, the wonkiness. It happened in the studio, but my studio has a constant temperature. I never let it get really cold in there. And so the ones that were a little bit wonky, we put a crossbar in. And the smaller ones seem to have held up pretty well, but that's the nightmare.
Oh.
So please try to imagine them as they were when they first hung, if you saw them. So I think I'll start talking about why this show is called Gratitude, and it's very simply because I've had such a good life. I mean, there have been losses, and I don't think anybody's life could be free of losses, but in general, it's been really good. And I need to mention that we being my family and myself, learned last night that a good friend lost his home in its entirety in Malibu with the fire, was burnt and injured and is hospitalized. And what we are imagining is this man lost his very beloved wife a few years ago, had not recovered from it, and he had a wall of photographs of her. She was a very beautiful woman, and he photographed her. And he had a whole wall of those photographs. And we're imagining that Jim ran into the house to get these photographs of Shada and is now hospitalized and in evidently not very good shape. So compared to that, I can deal with this. So I'm going to talk about painting, and most specifically my painting. And what I'm thinking is that since I'm not very sure of where everybody's interests lie, I will try to remember to stop here and there and see if there are questions, and instead of racing on in any direction. So the aspects of painting that I feel, my own painting, I can talk about are the vision, the process. I love talking about the process. Media, and media I think of as, you know, whatever puts the color or the material or whatever it is on the surface. And materials I think of as whatever supports the media, which is the paper or the canvas or the board or whatever. So, and I am not sure about how much interest anybody has in any one of these areas, so you can let me know as we go along. So I think I'll start with the vision. What I really want, and I really labor to get, is color that has some life in it. I like to see the color come alive, which means it needs some luminosity or some kind of energy or something visible that makes the color interesting and beautiful. And I do that in any number of ways, and I'll tell you more about how I try to get to that and how I fail and how I succeed along the way. So that's the vision, just getting the color to look beautiful. The basic vision, which I've held for a long time, is that I really like monochromatic paintings. Like before I die, I'm going to do a show, and well, maybe I won't do a show, but because I thought this was going to be my last show. But I kind of see a gallery with one blue painting and one green painting and one yellow painting and one black painting and one, maybe I'd have 2 or 3 different blues or two or three different reds, but that's a hard thing to do, so I haven't done it yet. But I will. So there is some history. When I first started painting, I guess when I first started painting seriously, I was about 17. Before that, I always drew when I was a kid, and in high school, we had what was called, which was optional, something called major art, which meant you could have an hour of art every day, which was really nice. We didn't learn much, but we had a time and an assignment and materials. So that was nice. But the real painting happened when I was 17, and I was fortunate enough to be accepted into a very fine art school. And in those years, what I was really interested in was botanical forms. And so when I graduated, I applied for and got a fellowship, which took me to the tropics, because that's where I thought I would find the botanical forms, and I was right. There was a lot of botany. Plants grew all over the place. I initially applied for Guatemala, which I thought would be really interesting, but the United Fruit Banana War broke out there. This was 1954 or 3, somewhere in there. And so they sent me to Venezuela, which was a second choice, and nobody ever got sent to their second choice. So my second choice was just, I went to a map and I went, there was Venezuela. I knew nothing about Venezuela. I went to the library. We didn't have Google or the Wikipedia back then. So into the library, and I looked up Venezuela, and what I found was oil, which didn't sound very interesting or supportive of my purposes. But before I left, there was an article in the New York Times, in the travel section, that said that in Venezuela was the most beautiful beach in the world. And so that first year that I was there, I painted. I taught English so that I could bring in a little more money, and I arranged to get to see that most beautiful beach in the world. And that beach was so beautiful that I still remember. I saw it and I cried. It's on the river Canaima, and this is not about painting. This is history. The river. There's something in the river which turns it an orange color. I think it's some kind of algae. And there are at this beach, you have in front of you 7 waterfalls, and then this orange-colored water, which is very clear. No matter where you are, you can see the river bottom, and in the sand there are these stripes of mica which sparkle, and so that was my beginning of really loving that beautiful country. It's an amazingly beautiful country, and I lived there for 24 years and finally left and came back because I wanted to be home. But it was it was a wonderful experience. I think it really enriched my life. Okay, there's history. So the process, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, the way I work. First, the paper is prepared. All of these paintings are on paper, and then they're eventually mounted on board. But the papers, one of the papers that I use most is just a bond paper, an acid-free bond paper, like the kind that you would print on if you're printing text, except I use something that's either 60 or 80 pound, which is far heavier than what you put into your printer. So that's one kind of paper. Another kind is papers that I purchase that come from Nepal or, trying to remember, Thailand. Both kinds of purchased papers come from those places. Those are handmade papers. They fade, and so they need to be prepared, and we give them, eventually, by the time the painting's finished, they have 4 or 5 coats of an acrylic varnish which contains ultraviolet filters. So, okay, we prepare the paper. There's another kind of paper which is an ordinary colored paper that I buy from Blick, and the reason I use a colored paper, and these are fairly heavy papers, is because if I have a piece of blue or a piece of green or a piece of yellow, it gives me a place to start. And there are all kinds of things that you can do there. You know, if you take a piece of blue paper and you put orange on it, you're going to get something very different from what you put if you put green on it. So that's a beautiful decision to make when the paper is in front of one, the choices of what to do with that paper and all of the possibilities of what can come from that make this whole process just totally pleasurable. And I can't imagine anything nicer to do than to stand over a piece of paper and think, well, what color am I going to put on this? So that's the paper. Then comes the paint. And what I'm calling paint is a whole lot of different things. There's acrylic paint, which is my favorite medium. I love acrylic paints because they're enormously flexible. You can do almost anything you want with acrylic paint. You can make it look like anything. I don't know if any of you remember the Little Abner comic strip. There was a shmoo, and if you boiled him, he was ham, and if you fried him, he was chicken. And well, acrylic paints are like that. Depending on how you use them, they will look and act very differently. And there are all kinds of mediums that you can mix into the acrylic paint to make it thicker, to make it finer, to make it transparent, to make it opaque. It's just totally flexible. So, okay, there's paint, there's wax crayon, there's oil crayon, or oil pastels. I use stamps. I use, what do we call it, things that I paste on, little bits of things. Collage, that's what we call that. And I'm trying to think of all the things that lie around my studio that I use to get different effects. And at some point I'll point out in the paintings that you're looking at, if I can remember, what made them look the way they look. So, okay, we now have all these rectangles of paper, and there are different widths of paper. And so what I do is I make a pile of the ones that are 22 inches wide and a pile of one that's 24 inches wide and the 23 inches wide. And what happens there is that it limits me. If I have all those papers mixed together, it's almost like there aren't enough limits. I know the 22s have to go with 22s. I can't put them with the 23s. So I can stay within that group of papers when I start to compose. Because composing means that I take a paper and I put it next to another paper and I decide this is nice, so they will go together. and then I pin them to these very long foam core boards. I have foam core boards that are 8 feet wide and 4 feet tall, and I pin to them. So you have, you might have 2 or 3 pieces here and 2 or 3 pieces there and another 2 or 3 pieces there that look like they're fine. And then I live with them. What I do is I go out into the studio 3 mornings a week and I do a workout. And as I work out, because I can't touch them, I'm working out, I can see them. And so after the workout, I realize this has to go there and that one goes here. And they get moved around as if it was some kind of puzzle. All of this, you have to know, is just a delightful operation. I'd rather be doing that than anything in the world. I often think if I win a vacation in Hawaii, I'm going to give it away, because what am I going to do there?
Workout.
So okay, that's composing. And for this show, I had this format in mind because I knew I was going to show in this venue. And so I wanted something tall and slim. I have to read something that I found. This is something I found in a magazine about food, and it's a comment by a chef who was talking about arranging food on a plate. And what he says was, height is more pleasing to the eye than width. And about food. But evidently, I see it that way too. I find that height is elegant. And if I could have found boards that were taller than these and that were workable, I would have used an even taller board. And I would have gotten more wonkiness than what I have here, probably. I would have run into more trouble. This operation, what we did here, was something that I invented. So I had to keep asking people who knew more than I did how to do it. And we still made mistakes. So, okay, we paint the papers and then put them together. And at some point, there's resolution. I think, okay, I really like these 3 pieces together. So I put it aside. And then I really like these 3. This show started in January of this year. And I don't do anything else. I mean, I eat, sleep, and paint. And go out with my daughter for drinks on Friday. So after they're resolved, then we prepare the boards. The board is the surface that the papers are adhered to. And the reason there has to be a board, and it can't be a painting on paper, is because I'm putting several pieces together. So they've got to be mounted on something, because how else do I do it? I can't tape them together, so I've got to mount them on something. So the boards, in this case, are an acid-free. Actually, they're finer than that. They're made for museums, to make museum boxes. They're conservation correct is probably how to describe it. They're a very pale gray, corrugated board, about 1/4 inch thick, and they're a very pleasant, well, I like paper, obviously, and they're a very pleasant kind of material to work with. So those boards get gessoed on both sides, and the reason for that is to strengthen them and to keep them from getting wonky. Actually, all of the papers, even before I use them, get acrylic medium on both sides for the same reason, to strengthen them, and also for the feel of them. It gives them a nice body, and it's nice to work with them like that. So that's the boards. Then the boards need to be cut to size. And that wasn't easy because we got rough edges when we were trying to cut them. So we took them to Gabe at Eureka Art and Frame, who has one of those like guillotines, and he cut the boards for us. I had help with all of this. The only thing I did was paint. And all of this mounting stuff and paper preparing, I had a crew. So the next operation was mounting. And the mounting, my companion mounter is here with the yellow cap on, and she could tell you what a job that was. The thing about mounting is you put the paper down, paper's not stable, and it will stretch, or it will do things you don't expect it to do, and we use so many different kinds of paper, and they were treated so differently that almost everyone was a surprise. So you put the paper down with the acrylic medium under it and on the paper itself, you know, like this. And then we take this wallpaper tool, which is kind of like a flat, wide spatula. And Chelsea had one and I had the other, and we work like this, you know? And we pull all this glop out, which falls on our shoes, and all over the floor. Glop alert. And when we do a good job, we pat ourselves on the back. But sometimes we wind up with bubbles. And so, you wouldn't believe this, but I wind up ironing some of them. Yeah, we make pinholes, and we iron or we press, and we do every kind of thing you can imagine. And we get them to work. I mean, you're not seeing any bubbles here, right? Pat myself on the back for that. So, and then once they're mounted, we have to repair them, because we never really get this edge exactly right. There may be a little bit of the gray board showing there. So that was something else. Chelsea had to go in with a pen and match the color and repair the edge. And then there was a really interesting accident. You keep thinking of Julia Child dropping the chicken on the floor. But there was an accident right in the beginning. These boards are soft. And we were mounting one, and I was leaning with my elbow on the soft board, and I made a little depression in the board, which was very unsightly. And I could have kicked myself, but I didn't. I really have become an expert at repair. I had to. And so I started filling it in. I think it was my daughter who recommended this.
The other one.
The other one? One of the other ones. I've got 3 of those. So finally, it was filling it in with acrylic medium. The problem with that is that the acrylic medium shrinks when it dries.
Oh yeah, that was me.
So I had to keep filling it in until it finally reached the level of the rest. But it was so nicely transparent that you can't tell. You'll never find it here, but it is here. Okay, so now we've repaired. And then comes embellishment. You know, we look at them and see if they need something else. So maybe I'll remember when we look around, but I have a friend who's always threatening to out me because he comes into the studio when I'm painting with a Q-tip. And that is how I make some of the polka dots. And that is what can be a final embellishment. But I think most of these polka dots that I have here were on the original paper. I will try to remember. Okay, so now we're up to the isolation coat, which protects the surface. And actually, the isolation coat is permanent. So if there were to be a fire, you could remove the final varnish, which comes after the isolation coat, and if there were any smoke damage, you would wash it all off. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that all of this has to be done. Sometimes I wonder, we take a lot of precautions for things that are never going to happen, but it feels better. So at that point, if they've already gotten one coat of varnish, which sometimes happens right at the beginning, we give them 4 more. The varnish is very transparent. And then, finally, framing. We framed only 4 for the show because of, the cost of framing. We did that, actually my son did that. And there's one that's framed, and that one is framed, and
Over here.
All of the small ones over there are framed. Am I missing anything?
It's a bigger one.
Oh, there's a big one out there? Oh, yeah, and they're the one that I can't see. So those are framed. So, okay, any questions? I'm ready for questions. Yes?
When you were describing the process over, I guess, months of moving paper around, like, so would you have experience where you get like 3 of them right, and then the next day you decide to move it, and then you have to completely do five more? Is that what the process is like?
I'm not sure I understand
Well,
that.
when you're assembling, how you're gonna match these up? Are you changing them
Let
over
me see if I can
process?
answer that. Suppose I'm working on this one,
Mhm.
right? And I see that that purple, which I have pinned there, would be better here.
Mhm.
Well, I'll take it away and I'll put it here, but I won't replace anything there.
Mhm.
I'll just take this down and put it back on the pile, right? And try not to confuse myself, because there are lots of papers, you know, a lot of papers. So I have a system,
Mhm.
and my memory is really bad, but I know what I have in the studio. I know every paper there. I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I know my papers. Yes?
Tell us about the history of this style. That this is a very distinctive personal style. Did it come from somewhere? Were you at one time different? Did you start off doing something else? I don't know of any other artist who paints like this.
Oh,
How
good,
did
I
this
like that.
happen? How did this happen?
You know, does anybody know their own operation?
What's your
it's just-
what's your history? What were you
Well,
doing?
as I said, I started off with botanical forms, and you know, when I was, it's hard to describe, but when I was at school, in high school, one of the assignments we had was to look at the photo of somebody and make a painting. And so I took a photo of my brother to make a painting, and I actually broke it into planes. And I don't know at 16 where I got that from. No. It was just that making his face in paint was boring to me. No, so I needed to do something with it. And then that exam that we had when I entered Cooper Union, there were three parts to the exam. Well, there was, you know, the kind of high school stuff like an IQ one day. But then the next day we had, the school, Cooper Union, is architecture, fine arts, and graphic arts. So the entry exam was we needed to design a garage with a workshop, right? And we needed to do a sculpture. We were given a block of plastiline of a tree in a storm. And we needed to draw a family around a table. And I had no art training except high school, which wasn't really great. And there were kids there competing. There were more than 1,000 of us, and they took 90 to enter, and then they graduated 40 because they weeded us out along the way. And I remember very clearly that everybody, because I could see it, you know, we were sitting right next to each other. Everybody was taking the plastiline and making a tree with branches that went in the same direction. And I thought, well, that'll be a pain in the ass. So I made one leaf. And nobody else did that. And then for the family around the table, I flattened it because I don't like space, you know. And then for the funniest part is for the architect, I had actually gone back to the Brooklyn Public Library and looked at architecture to see if I could learn, you know, because I kind of thought we were going to have a project like that, and they must have told us what we were going to do. And so I made this floor plan and elevation, and the floor plan had the workshop on the right. And the elevation, I put the workshop on the left. And as I got up and handed this in, I was so horrified that I passed out in the aisle. I wanted to get into that school so badly. And then I saw that I had done that, and I thought, oh God, I just ruined myself. But they took me.
Maybe because you fainted.
They felt sorry for me.
What school was that? What?
Cooper Union. The Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art, built in 1859. And we had we either had a round elevator and a square shaft, or a square elevator and a round. I think it was, our elevator was lined with brocaded silk. It was the original elevator, so all these messy kids with their paintings under their arms got into this brocaded elevator to go. It was a great experience, I gotta say.
And where is it?
New York, on between 7th and 8th Street, downtown.
Had you seen abstract art at that time?
Well, I was thinking about that, and what I saw at that age was Life magazine. And maybe I saw something, I must have seen something. We were taken to museums, the school system was really good. And we were taken, in grade school, we were taken to museums, but I don't remember seeing anything other than representational painting. And little rooms where Napoleon slept and things like that.
When you were describing that beach in Venezuela, I was really struck by that, with the clear orange river and then the stripes of
Mica.
city in mica, and then what I imagine would be the blue sea. The blue sea beyond that of the ocean.
Oh,
I saw your paintings, like the stripes, and that just was so clear to me. And I'm wondering two things. One is like, what is your connection? And you said you started out with floral imagery to nature, and or how does nature influence your mark making and your color? I think of like Joan Mitchell and her paintings that deal with her memory of the garden, even though she painted at night. And the other thing is I'm really interested in how you're using this vertical format, even though they seem so nature influenced to me. She said this format, which is kind of like your workshop, you're just contrarian. Normally people would use this format and you use this format. And we had a guest artist a few weeks ago at HSU, and she said she felt that artists were divided into artists that saw things vertically versus artists who saw things horizontally. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you're definitely a vertical artist, but you seem to be painting that nature, so I don't know.
I was thinking about that, because I think about a lot of things. It's a human form.
Yeah.
And there's an elegance to height and a dignity. And when I was envisioning this show, I was also thinking of it as a memorial to my life. And in the past, I have, in 1990, I lost 3 people who were sort of basic to the landscape of my life. And I started painting little houses, which I meant as tombs. They were safe places for these people. And it was a very sweet operation, and I did well with those paintings because I put my whole heart into them. And here, when I was thinking about a memorial to my life, and when I think about my life, and I said before there are losses, I have experienced no tragedy. And that's what I'm grateful for. It's been an ordinary human life, and a good one. And so I wanted, these seem sort of iconic, that they could be like gravestones, right, and have that dignity and elegance that goes with, I really would like to leave this world with certain grace. I don't want to be, I'll probably be kicking and screaming, but try to do it with certain elegance. But yeah, I love that. And I would like them even taller. Yeah.
Joan,
Yes.
I just wanted to say, that in addition to possibly markers, these also strike me as being flags, and iconic in that way, each little flag of the spirit.
I love flags.
My question was about what's the typical number of layers you will
Oh,
put
God.
on?
Many. Usually many. Yeah, I'll talk about that, but I don't think that I really answered the question about the paint, about how I paint. And I think I can, this was Gordon's question about, you know, what you might call my style or something. And then if I approach one of these rectangles, and usually what I want is a color. I just want a color. And I put it down and it looks like crap. So then I have to go back into it. And I have a big color sample, what do you call it? A big piece of, it's a board that I got a long time ago from the company that I buy my paints from mostly, which is, what do I buy my paints from? What?
Golden.
Golden. I got this from Golden a long time ago. I don't think they send it out anymore, but it's this big, and the color samples are fairly large. And so I take this piece of paper, which is like a dead color on it, over to these colors, and I lay it and I move it around, and I can see what color is on that sheet of samples that this paper needs. And so I will, and I have every color that they manufacture. My studios, I don't mix colors because it takes too much time. So I find the color and I will put spots of it down, or brush strokes, or I put down something in any form that appeals to me, and that's a mood thing. You know, do I want it round? Do I want it square? Do I want it long? Do I want it thin? It just depends, you know, on the day and maybe what I had for breakfast that morning. Who knows? And it just goes down differently. And then I look at it again, and if it still looks like crap, then I decide, do I want a colored line? Do I want, and it grows. It just keeps growing. So the ones that are one color, like that bottom purple over there, that went down in a way that I found very satisfying. I like that purple. So that gets to live. But that black there, that was a dead black. This one, this dead black, it has a lot of things happening to it, and those lot of things kept happening until finally I thought, okay, this can live. I never throw anything away. You know, everything gets recycled or worked on, or so some things are later and later and later. The other thing is, I said I don't mix colors, so if I have a color, say I have a yellow, and I want to do something with it, I might decide to put a blue on it so I can make a green. And what I do is I put a transparent layer on it. So anybody here who paints knows that your paints can be opaque or transparent, and you just decide, you know, which one and how to mix it up to get the depth of color on that layer. And that may not work either, you know. This is not foolproof, not the way I do it. I mean, I think I mess up as often as I get it right. But that's part of a process that I enjoy, because each time I go back to the piece, there's something to do, something that interests me, and I enjoy that process. So, yes, Jennifer.
Do you, excuse me, do you have synesthesia?
Do I have what?
Synesthesia? Do you know what that is?
No.
Well, for instance, I see the alphabet, I see letters in color. They're all color to me. And some people, smells evoke colors,
No, but I do know that I have a hypersensitivity to color because I had the experience of going to see my friends who were studying with Joseph Albers, and this is a long time ago at Yale, and they were working with these little cards of color, and what they did with the little cards of color was they would put a smaller card of color on top of the card of color, and they had piles of these, and so they were showing me what they were doing, and I sat down with a pile of these and I was going through them. I was looking at them one after another, and suddenly I got up, walked into a wall, and vomited.
Were you drinking anything?
I don't get respect.
Did you used to mix colors? I'm trying to figure if I remembered incorrectly when I went to your studio and you were mixing, you were like grinding pigment. This was a while ago.
That would mean I was making my own color, which I don't do, but I do have a muller.
Yeah.
Nice big heavy glass muller, and I'm trying to remember what I was doing with that, but it might have been that I was crushing a pastel, and I would crush a pastel and then rub it into a painting.
Yeah, that's what you were doing.
That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's,
But you weren't mixing colors in the
I
process.
don't mix colors. I will put white into a color if I'm going to put a glaze on it, and I think that some white in that color will make my glaze more luminous. But you know, all of that depends on the moment. Hi.
You mentioned that you moved, at one time you moved this purple, you were moving colors. How many of these panels, I don't know how big your space is, how many of these panels do you have available to work on all at the same time?
My studio's about 1,000 square feet, and I have the boards. The boards are lightweight, so I can keep moving the boards one in front of another, and I do a lot of that. It doesn't take any effort to lift them and move them. So I'll have a board of blues and a board of reds and a board of whatever, and keep moving them. Really, it's fun. Yeah, have a good time in there.
Did you conceive of the way the colors go together in the show itself?
Yeah.
Is that is that something you just
That's very
played around
important.
with to see how it worked?
Very important, very important. And I also think that they need each other. I don't see this as paintings, I see it as an installation. And I think alone, they don't have any real power. I think their power comes from the juxtapositions. And so the way I did this, because there were so many of them, I was working with 50 or 60 at a time, was I photographed them, I took them into Photoshop, and then again, I divided them into the 22-inch wide, the 24-inch, so I wouldn't have too many to work with. And then I arranged them. I made quartets and trios and pairs. And then I printed them out and I gave them to Violet. So, because I was afraid I would bring these down here and she would quit.
I did have a question.
Go ahead.
About, I guess, the creation of your patterns for some of these pieces. Is it just about the color play, or do they represent mood, or,
There's always a mood.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's about color. It's always about color. So if there are no questions, I'll point out some things that I think are fun or interesting. This, for example, you like my pointer? Hang on. Don't twist. Okay, that's it. This is a lace paper, which I purchased, layered over a black paper. So it's a double layer. And that's really a nice way to work. Let me see, there's something I really like, that I love actually, which is, it's don't think you can see this from where you are, but there's a pattern in this gray that's a little darker on a lighter gray. And the way I get that, and I love it, is by putting paper towels on top of a glaze. So we have a dry layer of paint, then I put this wet layer of a glaze, and then I put paper towels on it, and I roll over with one of these soft rollers that you use to paint the wall, very gently, and when I pick it up, I've got the pattern of the paper towel there. And people look at it and they think it's absolutely marvelous, and I did something there, and I think, what happens if I talk like this, it's gonna lose the mystery of it. This piece, this was a purchased paper. There's the paper towel pattern in there. I don't know if you can see it. That was a purchased paper that came, and it was blue and white stripes. And just, painting over the blue and white stripes, actually a red went down here on the white first, and then some kind of yellow-orange over it, and this got some kind of gray, and then the paper towel operation. And up here, there's also a paper towel pattern, but this I recognize as Kirkland paper towels. I got that at Costco. So,
There's more questions, Mama.
Do you have Coptic Onna up there?
what's that?
Coptic Onna. It's a Japanese character that's used for foreign words.
Where do you see
I'm
it?
seeing it in this orange. They almost look like, yeah. Uh-huh.
Gee whiz, I didn't know I knew how to do that.
So is that Japanese?
It could be, yes.
Oh, you know Japanese.
Learning.
Hidden talent.
How's my time? Do I have to shut up? I have a few more minutes?
So, are they all supposed to be framed eventually?
Well, yes. Yes, I like paintings to have some kind of minimal frame. I think it gives them a certain dignity. I like them to look finished and respected, and the frame does that. But that kind of frame is sufficient, very
Yeah.
minimal.
Mm-hmm.
Those look really nice.
Yeah.
They look
Yeah.
good.
And
Will
is
that help with the wonkiness?
Yeah, but it might need something stronger than that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm gonna see, Jack is gonna advise me on how we can fix it.
So you said that you see this as an installation almost.
Yeah.
Would you like somebody to just buy the entire show? Is that
Are you offering?
just,
Sold!
My dream is some Greek comes in on his yacht to the, and walks in here and says, "I'll take them all." Hasn't happened yet.
yeah.
So, there's one other thing I want to. This is something that I thought I would like to read to you. I'm reading a book called The 9th Street Women, and this is about 5 women at the beginnings of abstract expressionism, very brave women who, kind of put themselves out there when abstract expressionism was just being born. And the book is beautiful. It's called 9th Street Women, obviously. But the book, more than being about the women, it's a history of the time, and talks about how abstract expressionism was born and why. And so there's a quotation I'm taking, and the writer is, she says things very well. So she says here, and this is, I think, either at the end of the Second World War that she's speaking, or maybe during it, because they started being abstract expressionists somewhere in the late 30s or mid 30s, and then kept developing. And really, I was down the street on A Street when, at the age of 17, when this show was happening on 9th Street. So these people were at that point about in their 30s, more or less. So this quotation is, artists who were able to, who needed to work despite the desolation of the times, had been forced to look deeper for a subject, to look inside the only thing they could be sure of, themselves. The result was abstraction, free of anything but the material with which art was made and the naked energy of the artist who produced it. These were individual, personal works, conforming to no school and utterly devoid of politics. Nicely said, isn't it? Yeah. So if there are no more questions.
Just one comment question. The pieces evoke so many different directions and ideas, but one that keeps coming to me is a sort of microscope slide, and almost scientific exploration.
I didn't do very well in science in high school.
Yeah, but in a very poetic way. Anyway, they're very active, and I think that's part of the slide reference to me is sort of like, especially a lot of the patterns make me think both of, sort of small creatures actively moving under a slide.
That's
very literally.
That's the energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the energy that my daughter calls them the squigglies.
They're basic relatives.
Right. That's the point. There should be some energy there, and the energy of the person who painted.
Absolutely, and also the material themselves, the material that the paper is made of. You've talked a lot about the different paper. Paper is, trees, it's cotton, it's all kinds of things, and even paper towels is paper. That's all kind of, I get a feeling of the respect for the matter itself, which is very exciting.
I love paper. Paper is responsive. Depending on what paper you're using, the medium that you apply to it is going to look different, one paper or another. I find canvas dead. I used canvas, when I was at school and for years afterwards, and then turned to paper. And at first I mounted the paper on canvas because canvas is a very good structure to work on. But the paper has life. No matter what paper it is, it's going to do something to the medium that you apply to it. And it's nice to handle. I like touching paper. It's rich.
Do you have a favorite place to find interesting papers?
To buy paper?
Yeah, interesting, like the lace paper and things. Do you find them in different places?
I'm afraid I won't remember exactly, but you can email me and I will send you. There are several places that I buy online that sell what they call decorative papers, and what you want are the ones that come from Thailand and Nepal, and then Koso papers. But there's another name for the ones that are textured and rich. One of the things that happens with these papers is that when we put the medium on them, they become richer, because dark places get darker and light places get lighter, and the papers become interesting far more than, and they are beautiful colors, which is why I want to use it. I think there are actually some papers here that I haven't done very much with, and see if I can see one. This came just as it is. I didn't do anything to that. These three. These are all as is. They are just as they were when they were purchased, except for the mediums on them, which do enrich them, make them more interesting. Yeah.
Have you ever gone to a process and watched a paper maker making the mash and actually rolling it out and things like that?
I don't do things that take so much time.
Not you doing, but watching them.
Yeah. Yes, I have seen that happen.
It's pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
There's a whole lot of stuff that some painters do that I'm in too much of a hurry for. So, yes.
On the third one from the left on the top, the bottom, was that paper textured when you got it?
No,
Or did you do something to texture it?
no, I think that was textured, but that has a lot of paint on it. You know, I mean, you can walk over it and you can see that there's a lot of paint on it. Wish I could remember everything I do, but can't. I think, though, that you can see what a good time I have doing it. Yes,
Could it be called serious play?
sure.